Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Hello, Happy New Year. Hope you all had a good New Year's and hope you didn't overindulge too much and aren't nursing a horrific hangover right now. To hopefully soothe you a little with our dulcet tones. Yes, my microphone settings are correct. So sorry for last time. Sam and I are here as FPL's frantic festive period nears its end. Thankfully, I think. We always say, don't we? Oh, God, you know, when there's a big international break, something, oh, I can't wait for it to be back. But sometimes there's just too much of a good thing, you know? Anyway, how are you, mate? Good New Year's? How's the head?
Yeah, head's absolutely fine. All good. Had a great evening back at my old village. It's kind of a tradition now. We go back and celebrate New Year's there. So really good New Year's Eve. Obviously, we were looking forward to the Arsenal-Brentford game tonight as well, which may not have paid off for most people, but I got some joy out of it. So a good start to 2025 as well. I hope if you're listening out there, you have had a similarly good start to the new year. And this one is your best yet. In the meantime, to start you off properly, we are Who Got the Assist. On today's pod, we'll be quickly going through team updates. Obviously, the game week is now wrapped up, which I'll go into in a moment. But we thought we would take a little bit of a look at the 200 Club. Now, obviously, we've had our first member inducted into it this season in record time. Mo Salah smashing through that barrier. And we're going to have a look at who else we're nominating as future inductees by the end of this season. After that, game week preview. So especially Nottingham Forest on the radar this week and how they've become such a huge factor in all of our game weeks recently. And then, of course, best transfers, bold claims for game week 20. Captaincy this week, I imagine, will be relatively short. And our teams to wrap it up ahead of game week 20 as well. It is Wednesday, the 1st of January. Very happy new year. And all the games are done. So we can move straight on to a fresh baked game week review.
Yes, we can. God, it's not been the best game week for me, certainly. But you've had a stormer, and you're actually within touching distance of me. I think probably 1 or 2 points in it now. I told you you'd come back.
Yeah, it's all swings and roundabouts, isn't it? Yeah, I've had a few good weeks in a row now. I've cut my rank from about 1.6 million 5 weeks ago to just outside the top 600k. So wiped a million off of it. It's been a decent little run. And this week was also a fairly decent, if not outstanding week, 83 points, another 100k off the rank as well, which was nice. I was hoping for maybe a little bit more tonight, but Mbermo getting me the goal. If anyone was going to wipe out that double Arsenal clean sheet for me, having Mbermo in my team did help and kind of balance it out a little bit. Trent, obviously gangbusters this week for both of us. 15 pointer from him. When that goal went in, you basically gave me a bit of a spoiler ahead of time because out in Newbury, apparently my Wi-Fi is not good enough to be streaming it quite live. So I got the full capital letters Trent from you, and then I paid attention to the goal going in just as I looked up. So yeah, that was actually very welcome. Obviously 15 points from him was brilliant. Robinson, 4, got the assist. In the midfield, it was all about Mo Salah, and Burmo got the goal tonight. And João Pedro finally getting some points, 2 assists from him, 9-pointer up top, alongside the very highly owned Alexander Isak. There were some points on my bench. If you've been listening to the pod for quite a while, I don't often get that upset about it. I quite like having a strong bench, especially around this period. And for a certain amount of time, it looked like I might be leaning on either Semenyo or Hall. There was rumours of a sickness bug going around Arsenal. I thought I might get Hall off the bench for 12 points. Didn't happen, of course. And again, with Jackson, didn't start the game and could have stayed on the bench if they were performing any better against Ipswich. And then I could have maybe got Semenyo's 5 points. So whilst it is a bit annoying having those points on my bench, I almost take it as a bit of a comfort blanket, knowing that my team's relatively well balanced and set up for future game weeks if I do need to rotate.
Yep, fair play. Good week, well done. So yeah, not very much between us now. Bit of a poorer game week for me. The only kind of main pluses were the Salah captain, and that was only kind of a negative plus, really, just due to all the Parma captains out there. Sorry, all. And the Trent goal, as you've mentioned, the sole kind of high spots for me. Yeah, sorry about that. I'm watching on my Xbox as well, so I'm always behind. So I don't know what you guys in Newbury are using for your.
We're about 30 seconds behind, it seems. Like
Yeah.
sometimes SofaScore gets it about 10 seconds before the goal, which obviously isn't helpful. But yeah, not ideal.
Those telegrams not reaching Newbury.
No.
Goal, stop. Trent, stop. Yes, okay, fair play. But yeah, a really frustrating week for me. Fitting the FPL as well to end the last year and start a new one. When it goes wrong, it all goes very wrong. Unlike you, Sam, I don't like having a strong bench. I hate points on the bench, and I'm looking forward to when I can completely gut the thing and have no hopers and cheap enablers all over the place. But of course, I totally understand where you're coming from. It's just one of those kind of things which are part and parcel of FPL. But yeah, so annoying. So 50-50s hit me for an 18-point swing. As spoken about on the last pod, I played Mikolenko and Ahmad over Hall and Raul. So on the pitch, I had 3 points, and on the bench, I had 21 points, which is incredibly frustrating. Bought in Sarr for Mitoma, who missed a big chance and blanked. And then tonight, Erdegaard managed an XGI of 0.21. Fantastic player. What a great player to watch. But pre-assisting, being part of the engine room isn't really what you want. So I think me and my initial bullishness from what Odegaard could become in Arsenal's defence is something that I may have to admit defeat on going forward. 68, 120k or so red arrow down to 580k. Got lots to think about where Odegaard's concerned, as well as my defence. I'm missing a couple of key flavours we'll discuss later. A bit of an annoying kind of start to the year. But that's FPL, isn't it? Just eternal torment and annoyance. Anyway, I do love it.
Happy New Year!
Yeah, everybody. No, I do love it. Really, it's one of those things that sometimes you get a week like this. It's just when it's around a certain sort of milestone in the actual calendar year, you're kind of like, oh god, it's always nice to go into Christmas on the green. Always nice to go into New Year on the green. Did manage to Christmas on the green, but I've kind of taken 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and ended up pretty much where I was 3 or 4 weeks ago. And so it's been kind of, since I've got out of the millions, I've just been kind of pootling around this point. So yeah, you're bound to overtake me, especially if I do end up taking a New Year hit. More of which anon. So this week it's all about the 200 Club. We just thought we'd kind of quickly and perhaps somewhat qualitatively touch on this now and come back to it later on in the year, just because obviously the king of fantasy football, Mo Salah, is in the 200 Club in record time. It's absolutely unbelievable. This guy's the absolute GOAT of FPL, certainly since we've been playing. I think it's overall, incontrovertibly, he is the GOAT. I'm looking at the 200 Club, Sam, as you'll know, and as long as some listeners will know, it's been a stalwart of who got the assists. We've been looking at this as part of talisman theory for the last 5 or 6 years. Don't know if I'll do that again in the summer, by the way, to be honest. I think content as a format has sadly moved on from long form articles. But yeah, it always kind of formed part of the discussion and something we kept an eye on throughout the season. And over the last 8 seasons, you kind of have 200 points, I think, Sam, is like the zenith of FPL brilliance, isn't it? That's kind of the player you want. It's like the kind of archetypal evergreen season keeper in our squads. And over the last 8 seasons, we kind of average about 5.8 players hitting the 200 Clubs to score more than 200 points in an FPL season. Salah, obviously the top scorer of all time, 303 in 2017-18, the undisputed FPL GOAT. Haaland, both years, has been in the Premier League, has been in the 200 Club. A few other notable options who have been in it multiple times. Son has been in it 3 times. I think I'll get there this year. Sterling has been in it 3 times. Definitely won't get there this year. Trent twice, Saka twice, and of players still playing, just about Kevin De Bruyne is just about still playing in his dotage. He's also been in it twice. But yes, Salah, undisputed FPL GOAT there already, Sam. And I mean, it's not even worth discussion, is it? This ain't no Messi versus Ronaldo. It's just beyond argument what an amazing player he is. I think we both need to just give voice to that. Well, I have. Your turn.
Yeah, you just run out of superlatives for a player of his quality in FPL terms, but also just in general football terms as well. I think he hasn't really got the respect he's deserved in recent seasons, maybe because there's not been the team trophies that perhaps in any other generation Liverpool probably would have won if it wasn't for the Man City of it all. But this season, they're on track for the Premier League, arguably even the Champions League, other trophies they're still in with a shout of course. And maybe this is the year that he finally gets all of the flowers that he has duly deserved for many, many seasons now. In FPL terms, again, I think, like you said, it is beyond dispute now. The amount of times he's hit 200 club, as you already mentioned, the consistency at which he's done it as well. There's never really been a proper off season for him. There's been quieter seasons, but even in those, he's still comfortably hit 200 points. This is someone that we can just rely on week in, week out. He's almost always overperformed on his data and is massively doing so this year. And I think it's testament to the quality that he has and the confidence we have in him that he can overperform his data by almost double, and nobody is questioning whether it will properly regress to a point where he won't be valued for money. We know that it's going to continue because he's just that inevitable and that high quality. So yeah, long may it continue. It might well be his last season. We obviously don't know whether or not he's going to sign the contract that Liverpool present him with. From an FPL point of view, it will be a sad day when he leaves the game and the league in general as well, especially if you're a Liverpool fan. But it will maybe shake it up because at the end of the day right now, it's just so obvious who your captain is pretty much every single week. And over the last 7-8 years, it's been more often than not, every season, I think at least once or twice has been a patch of, okay, well, you just have to captain Salah. You can't go against him, bar maybe last year or the year before with Haaland. He's just been so unbelievably consistent. And yeah, like you've said that he is the GOAT. He is definitely the GOAT of FPL.
Yeah, very interesting, isn't it? How at the start of the season it was like, there's possibly no room at the inn for Salah for a lot of us, and lots of jobs. Yeah. And it's unthinkable now, isn't it? But it's one of those things that at the time made a lot of sense. But you got to react to what's in front of you, and especially where Haaland was concerned, there's fighting his way to back to the top. Salah over the course of this year, I don't know. It's very 50-50, my thoughts on him staying. Obviously, Premier League, the fact that he's been such a mainstay of fantasy football for a long time would make me happy if he had kind of signed on for the next couple of years. But it may also kind of, I don't know, mean that 50 million Salah next year becomes kind of 100% owned when Liverpool get their amazing Gameweek 1 fixture. They always seem to get served up. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is. And he is just the undisputed fantasy football GOAT. And we spent more than enough time talking about him on this podcast. It's really incredible stuff. So attention turns to this year. What I've done for this one, I've got a graphic on YouTube, and I'll just explain it very quickly for those listening, which is still most of you. What I've done is I've basically taken for this year the top 20 players in FPL. They've taken their mins, so their minutes played, turned them into 90, so we've got an idea of that, and divided their points totals by the minutes played. So we get a points per 90, which is, I think, is better than points per game because that doesn't quite kind of show if a player's been subbed on and off and doesn't quite reflect the expected minutes that we've seen. And then Sam, for trying to figure out how we project this, you came up with a very kind of simple solution.
Yeah, so we could have messed around a little bit more with the X minutes, but at the end of the day, we can't really tell what the minutes are going to be moving forwards. We'll go through, and if you're watching on YouTube, if you're not right now even, I would recommend going and checking out if you get the chance, because there are a few other data points here that we will be referencing. But we've kept it nice and simple. Basically, we're at the halfway point anyway. So a lot of these players have we've just doubled their points totals. Next to it, we've obviously got the extrapolated points per 90 and their minutes so far. So there are a number of players on this sheet that, whilst their projected totals by the end of the season might be, let's say, 190, 180, so close, if they were to get a little uptick in their expected minutes, the points per 90 that they're getting are so strong and even better than some of the potential 200 club nominees that they just need a little tweak upwards and they could easily end up in the 200 point club as well. So we'll go into some of those in a minute. The obvious caveat here is Liverpool have played one less game. So we've extrapolated the data there to reflect a 38 game campaign for them, not rather than just doubling their points total so far. So that's why the likes of Trent, Salah, Luis Diaz might not be quite double the points so far. But yeah, we'll go through them one by one, pick out some notable brilliant performers and reference whether or not we think they'll end up matching Salah in the 200 club. I don't think they'll be getting 400 club, which Salah seems on track for, though, Tom.
Yeah. The run rate is 11.5 points per 90 for Salah.
Yeah.
Absolutely wild, isn't it, really? But yeah, top line of this, really, the headline is that basically, as of now, if we do extrapolate data in this way, 8 of the top 20, well, 7, because Mo's already there, are in the running to make the 200 club at the current run rate. So normally we're looking at kind of 5 or 6 players, as I said, in the 200 club. Last year we had 7, who were Palmer, Foden, Watkins, Saka, Haaland, Son, and Salah. So we end up with 1 more this year. And currently, those who are looking to make it over the threshold are Salah, obviously, Palmer, Isaac, Cunha, and then Bumo, Haaland, Saka, and Wood. Now, obviously, there's loads of caveats around here. That's just their first kind of the performance of the first half of the season, and it kind of assumes, and we obviously can't really build much in to assume how it's going to go for the second half of the season, but it just basically assumes that they do the first half again. Not an exact science doing this, but it still gives us like a frame of reference effectively to have this discussion. And that's kind of all this is, really. I wouldn't take it as being a dyed in the wool, something to take to the bookies or anything like that. So Salah up top, spoken about him already. Judging by this, we'd be expecting Palmer to come in with a fairly hefty score, like far and away the best player in FPL for the second year in a row, other than Salah's brilliance. It's 7.8 points per game. You'd be looking at kind of him nudging the 300 mark if he did make it, continue to replicate the performances that he's had so far. I don't know. I'm more than Chelsea have faltered over the last few weeks. That's kind of definitely fair to say, with the draw against Everton and the losses against Fulham and Ipswich. However, scored against Fulham, got the 10-pointer against Ipswich, post bar, really good save by, I think it's Walton in goal for Ipswich, I believe. So yeah, really good chances, I suppose, even in those games where Chelsea are losing. And as noted, a really good run kind of upcoming, and has the quality, doesn't he, Sam? I think that he's kind of a shoe-in almost for the 200 club, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he only needs another 57 points to get there. So you'd imagine he gets there with 7 or 8 game weeks to go, potentially, maybe even a few more than that to go. 286 points he's on track for, and in most seasons that would be by far the highest points total, and would beat Salah in a lot of the previous seasons that we've talked about. It's just that we're all going to forget about Palmer's brilliance this year, generally speaking, because he's just in the shadow of someone who's clocking up numbers we've just never seen before. So yeah, he's on for a mega haul, 286 points, very close to 300. He could nudge it. He could get there with a couple extra explosions in the second half of the season, but he's going along at a really nice run rate, and he's still good value for money, I think, for someone nudging the 300 club at under 12 million. I wouldn't be even questioning having him in my team at this point.
Yeah, I mean, if you did achieve that, it's worth noting that with the second highest FPL point score of the last 8 years. I don't know if that's all time, but it'd be just below the Salah, so it's 303. As I said, it's just projections are based on the current kind of totals, but there we go. Next up, Isaac. He's running at 7.3. Obviously had a bit of a faltering start to the season at the start of the year. I think he was the highest owned player, wasn't he, Sam? In FPL, it was like 5 million. Over half the teams kind of owned him at the start. Obviously, had injuries, had all sorts kind of going on, but recently has really turned it up a notch. I don't know if one of those, I hate the term, but he really does seem a bit unplayable right now. And crucially, if he can stay fit, as we noticed a few weeks back, the issues that he's had, if you look at the transfer market, there's no sort of recurring single injury which seems to be holding him back. It's not something, so he's got a dodgy hamstring or something which kind of continually means that he misses a few weeks, like Michael Owen or something. It does seem to be kind of a few sort of niggly injuries here or there, and it's long been said that he's got kind of all the ingredients to be the Golden Boot winner, be a player who I suppose figures highly in our teams going forward, like one of those players who maybe was a bit of a cut price premium in some ways at the start of this year, 8.5, now at 9.2. And I don't know, we project at the current rate, he'd kind of score 224, which again would be a really, really decent score over the last few years. Wouldn't be a high score any year, but I mean, you're looking at kind of top 2, top 3 in FPL if he did kind of manage there. And another one that if he can stay fit, Sam, and Newcastle, obviously he is feeding off the last kind of 4 or 5 games, But if Newcastle are able to keep it up, and he's able to keep it up, sort of at the back end of last year, he can go on serious runs. If he can put together a serious run over the course of the next 18 game weeks, would you bet against him getting 200 club? I certainly wouldn't.
No, he certainly looks almost a shoo-in at this point if he stays fit. And he's got the second lowest minutes of the top 8, who are all projected to get 200 club at the moment, but comes in third overall in the projections, which just goes to show how brilliant and how explosive he has been as well. So this is a guy, like you said, is a cut price premium. I think next year we'll be seeing him north of 10 million, almost certainly. And it is just a question mark on, can he stay fit? And as you correctly said, a few weeks ago, we mentioned it. There's no one recurring injury. So there's no reason to think that there would be something that keeps him out for an extended period. But even if there was, you deal with him as a player who on average is getting 7.3 points a game. And if he ever gets injured, then obviously you just use a transfer to get rid of him, because he's out for an extended period of time. But you treat him as a 200 club member almost now, I believe. He's in a lot of teams already, so I don't think we need to be telling people that as new information. But unless he does get crocked, he's almost a shoo-in right now, and again, should probably get there fairly comfortably if his minutes increase in the second half of the season, which, as I mentioned, because they were so relatively low in the first half, you'd almost think that as long as he stays fit, they have to increase. So yeah, he's looking brilliant, and he's going absolutely nowhere in my team anytime soon, as long as he stays fit, of course.
Yeah, I think that top 3, if I was to go and, but obviously Salah, not making any money on that, but the Palmer and Isaac, I think you get really bad odds basically on them being in the top 3 or being in 200 club at the end of the year, just because of who they are. There are 3 players in that top 8 that I mentioned who perhaps you would kind of have question about. So I'm going to group them together a little bit here, Sam, and obviously we can speak about them separately too. That's Cunha in 4th, who's on 111 points right now. So run rate 6.4 points per game, projected to get 222, of course. Bumo 110, 220, and then Wood at the very bottom 106, so up to 212. Notably, these are the 3 highest overperforming players in terms of goals minus XG in the game at the moment. So Cunha of 5.9. I think that Bumo's goal tonight was 0.06 XG I saw, so he might even have overtaken Cunha as being the most overperforming player in the game. And third is Wood as well, 4.1 for overperformance. So those are 3 players who have had a very, very good start to the season, and there's no getting around that, and that's evinced in the points that people have scored from them at various times. I have none of them in my team, and probably removed Cunha at the wrong time, probably removed Bruno when I didn't need to, and I haven't owned Wood all season. But those 3 are 3 players who I look at them, Sam, look at the underlying data in terms of their performance, just kind of think about the teams that they play for and what could possibly happen over this kind of the end of the season, and wonder, would I be backing them to make the 200 club? I don't know, maybe one may just about kind of slip in, but I think you're probably looking at a bit of a drop off for the 3 of them en masse for the end of over the course of the second half of the season. What do you think about those 3?
Yeah, it's interesting you should say that, because I was going to note the same thing, that if I was to pick anyone outside of injured players, of course, to drop off in the second half of the season, I would back the data. And yeah, Wood, I'm very tempted to buy him this week because he's just inevitable at the moment. He continues to score and continues to damage my rank. But we've seen this in years gone by. They will have hot streaks even for as long as half a season, but the data almost always catches up with them, barring someone like Salah, who we've obviously already mentioned. And look, they're all performing really well. I'm sure they will get very close to the 200 club just by coasting along, getting another 7 or 8 goals in the second half of the season, which for all of them seems relatively possible. And being on penalties will help them as well. But I think, especially in the cases of Cunha and Wood, the data, for me anyway, especially being strikers too, would suggest that there might be a little bit of a drop-off coming. Obviously, Cunha's got the ban and then is coming into a really tough run of fixtures. So I think there's going to be a little bit of a drop-off there. And if we were extrapolating the data after another 5 game weeks time, I think Cunha might just drop outside of this projection. That's just my guess based on the next fixtures to come. And obviously I might be proven completely wrong there. But if I was to guess anyone drops out, it would probably be Cunha and Wood, personally. Wood, again, has been brilliant, but he's just hitting the 200 club at the moment, 212 points projected. But for him to continue at this rate would be continuing to overperform by quite a distance. And considering Nottingham Forest aren't really a goals driven, obviously they're winning a lot of games, they are scoring goals, but not anywhere near the amount of some of the other clubs that are represented in this top 8. I do see maybe a little bit of a drop-off coming there. And Burmo, I think, will be the exception. Being a midfielder, having that creativity as well, driving it, and also being very talismanic for them, on top of the penalties, on top of complete 90-minute man every single week, and the fact that Brentford are very strong, particularly at home, for scoring goals, I can still see him finding enough points to get over the line in the second half of the season, even with a little bit of a drop-off. But again, it might not be a comfortable ride for him for the second half of the season. I think Cunha and Wood might just fall short.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. And I wonder whether as well, I mean, Wood had a very good start to the season, which kind of obviously he's kind of continued that, but presaged kind of a very good run of putting goals together a game, basically. And because of how the bonus is at the moment, getting a 9-pointer every single time. Cunha, obviously, great footballer. If does end up at Arsenal, we're very happy. But a really good footballer, good at stealing glasses too. But at the start of the season, maybe in some ways that reminds us to maybe look at who the mirror image, I suppose, is going to be. So over the second half of the season, who might be kind of interest and produce that sort of performance over the second half in some areas. So absolutely fine if you're thinking going back to Wood, no problem with that whatsoever. Fast there in the comments may have been reading my notes, but maybe a player like Mateta, who did it last year, could be a player in consideration. You've also got Sarr and Eze there, just because Palace have got a really good run up until pretty much all the way until game week 30, so all the way into April. Last year, obviously, because Glasner came in, you saw Mateta kind of go from a bit of a perennial no-hoper on the sidelines of FPL to a proper asset. FPL points per game went from 2.6 pre-Glasner to 7.69 post-Glasner. So you're looking for perhaps kind of candidates to replicate the kind of performance we've seen in the first half from those players, and it may be a Mateta would do that. Whether they get over the 200 mark, I don't know. You need to have a real sort of thrust over the second half of the season to get there. And there's a few other players as well that we'll talk about in a minute, the likes of Jackson and Watkins, who could get there. But I wonder whether a player like that would have too low a base, I guess, to really sort of push through into our reckoning here. But as an ongoing sort of FPL consideration, you may see a player like that rise and then become your kind of proxy in the second half of the season to a Wood or a Cunha. There's a few out there like that, aren't there?
Yeah, so one thing that I noted from this top 8 is they are all talismanic players in their respective clubs. High XG teams on the most part. So Cunha and Wood are probably the exceptions there, that their teams don't produce high amounts of XG every single week necessarily. All of them, I believe, looking at it quickly, are all on penalties, and all of them get really decent minutes. Wood maybe a slight mark down on the X minutes, but so those are the ingredients. Those are what creates a 200 club asset. High team XG, talismanic, on penalties, getting good minutes. Perfect. So who else could get there in the second half of the season? Well, you mentioned him briefly, but I think Ollie Watkins has a really good shout of upping his game in the second half if he can maintain the starting spot. Now, Duran's obviously suspended for the next game. He did very well against Brighton. We'll get another opportunity against Leicester. And if he can just stamp his authority on that starting spot and just pump his X-mins by a fraction, just a little bit, to get him back up to 80, 85 a week on average, then I think he's not a far shout. He only needs another 108 points to get there in half a season. Knowing that he is now on penalties, I believe. I think he took the last one, right? So he's back on penalties. He obviously has the data, really good data this season. It's just the fact that he's been dropped recently and the X-mins have obviously, in tandem with that, been reduced. That would lead us to being doubtful on that. But we know the quality is there. If Emery starts trusting him more again, and after the Leicester game, you'd think that that's a bit of a kind of a free swing for him to try and get a couple of goals and get back into really top form. I think he could put his hand up and be a real factor in the second half of the season and shake up the template a little bit.
Yeah, he's currently outside of Haaland running. I think I'm pretty sure I saw he's at 0.7 non-pen xG per 90, which is obviously better. I think it's better than Isaac. So certainly there is kind of a decent case. I mean, last year overperformed to a huge extent, especially when it came to the assists, which really drove it. It was like 18 assists last year, and a crazy amount of FPL assists. If I remember correctly, I can't remember what the differential
was. A huge
was.
overperformance.
It was absolutely crazy. I think it was like 5 or 6 assists, like FPL assists on top of the actual assist number.
Yeah.
And whether we'll see that again, we don't know. Duran, I think he's been charged as well. So I think, we said last week, Watkins are definitely next to. It may be that he gets a few more as well, depending on what happens with Duran. We'll need to see. But yeah, I think he's a good example, Watkins, of a player who probably fulfills both of being kind of a player who obviously has put up good performance. He does appear on this table in the top 20. As Sam said, he only needs another 108 points only. Needs another 108 points to get to the 200 club for the second year in a row. And he could be a good example of a player who has had a quiet start of the year, quietish, judging by last year alone. I mean, I think at the start of the year I was very high on him, wasn't he? Started off with him and said he was a cut price premium. I think it will come. It just depends on how he can deal with the competition when Duran is back behind him and they've got the Champions League too. Those are mitigating factors, which may see that he ends up kind of around the 180 mark. We'll need to see. Elsewhere in the kind of the top 8, Saka, I wonder whether his injury has curtailed any chance of him getting his own hat-trick of 200 club. I think we'll just need to see on that one, but I depends when he comes back. We just don't know. 107 points thus far, therefore projected to get to 214. I think we're probably maybe seeing that that might be the end for his quest. I wouldn't be surprised to see him kind of score 170, 180, but I think that's kind of that for this year. And Haaland, 110 points, so just kind of inching into 220. Run rate of 5.8 points per game, obviously an abject period over the last few weeks, but the goal this week potentially bringing him back to parity a little bit. Wouldn't be surprised if he makes it, Sam, to be honest, for the 220. But given the price tag, if the price tags were, if FPL repriced it, I know FPL General always likes to kind of float this idea, but if FPL repriced it now, you kind of be looking at Haaland at kind of 12.5-ish and Salah at 15, and just thinking, well, all right, Haaland for 12.5, getting to 220, absolutely fine. Salah for 15, getting to 400, yeah, sure, I'll definitely pay that as well. But as it is with Haaland, his price tag, even if he is projected to hit 220 on the current run rate, you look at it and think, it's just not worth it, is it? Given the amount of hobbling you've got to do to your entire team to make that work. If you do go Haaland, completely understand it. It made a lot of sense as a gamble, but I don't know. It just 220 points for that amount of money and what it does to your team just doesn't seem value for money, does it?
No, not at all. And yeah, like you said, 220 points projected. I think he'll beat that because he has been in a bit of a barren spell, and you'd imagine they sort themselves out fairly well, not quickly necessarily, but to a point where he'll be scoring much more regularly again. If that's the case, I can see him upticking to maybe something more like 230, 240, which is obviously still a great season overall, objectively, but it's also what else you can get up front for far less money. Isak, we've talked about, is over 6 million less, or around 6 million less. No, 4 point something now. Cunha is obviously half the price. Wood is also almost 8-9 million less. And then you've got players like Jackson, Watkins. All of these are decent options for a lot less money. This guy needs to overperform them by a long way in order to be good value for money. And you need to almost want to captain him every other week at least. So yeah, unfortunately right now, he's just not going to be anywhere near the conversation for me because of what else you can do with your team without him. And you can still have strikers that are matching him, if not beating him, for far less money. He would need to really turn the season around and start doing what he did in the first couple of game weeks to maybe turn my eye and turn my attention again.
Sure. Okay, so that certainly makes a lot of sense. So instead of going through the kind of the pretenders, I guess, there's probably a few that we should talk about. So players like Maddison, who are he's currently on course for 196 points. I'm not sure he'll make that, to be honest. Like Diaz, probably again just due to the competition at Liverpool, I wouldn't be too concerned. But I wouldn't. I'm not sure that he'll replicate where he is now, barring an injury, in which case, hey, why not? But Jackson, Sam, kind of briefly touched on him. 94 points, so looking to get 188, performing very well in the underlying data. It should be said from Nicholas Jackson, 4th overall at the moment, underperforming a slight bit, so 0.1 underperformance, but yeah, 9 for non-pen XG, 9 goals scored this year, and 4th for non-pen XG for the year. And I don't know, it wouldn't take much, would it, for Jackson to get there? I think you probably just need to see some conversion from him a bit more for in terms of overperformance almost. That's kind of what you need, I guess, to propel yourself into the upper echelons. So Salah over the years has been obviously a fantastic FPL asset, but there has been that element of overperformance in what he can in his returns, and that's a lot of times just based on him being a very, very good player. And sometimes you kind of wish you could see that a little bit more of Jackson, where it's always good if the numbers are tracking the underlying stats, but sometimes with Jackson, we spoke about last week, when you watch him play, it is a bit of a wince fest, and hopefully that is something that if I do keep hold of him, which I probably will do, I'd be hoping that he could arrest that, but we need to see. He's still young, isn't he?
Yeah, for sure. And he's learning every week and every season. So he's a much more complete player than he was last year. And he's keeping players like Nkunku largely out of the side because of what he can do off the ball, what he does in the channels. So there's a lot going for him and a lot of reason to be excited by him if you're a Chelsea fan in particular. Whether or not he's a 200 club member this season, I'm maybe losing faith a little bit. The reason for that is the X minutes aren't quite where I would want them to be. I really would like to see him finishing matches rather than just starting the majority of them. He's had a couple of benchings recently. I'll forgive that for rotation purposes, and we're largely out of that kind of busy period of the season where you would expect rotation in the midweek games. So maybe that's in his rear view mirror now. But even so, he's still getting taken off quite regularly between 70 and 80 minutes. And to hit 200 points, as I mentioned with the top 8, you really need players that are getting, largely anyway, much more than that and looking towards that 90-minute maximum. And whilst he's close to the projection, I am a little bit worried that he's going to fall slightly short. It will still be a good season. He's still great, but not having penalties, getting taken off a little bit early, I do think that he will maybe just fall short, maybe in the 180 to 190 mark. And of course, the projections reflect that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a really kind of fair caveat on Jackson, that you're basically looking at 70 minutes, aren't you? If Nkunku gets injured or something like that, then fine. And qualitatively, as I mentioned last week, and has been said again, maybe evidenced by the Ipswich performance, Chelsea, they seem to be a different proposition without Jackson. There was a bit of a hope that I briefly messaged you as well, that, hey, this is the last game that Jackson, it could be hit with the ban if he gets yellow carded, so maybe he'll stay on the bench. But I think that Ipswich's performance, particularly bloody Liam Delap's performance, wow. Really seemed to mean that he was. I felt that the ex-Jackson sub was just rising and rising, wasn't it? I was just kind of hoping that Chelsea would be comfortably sort of 2 or 3 up at half time, then we'd be counting our first sub points, but alas, it wasn't to be. So hopefully that importance to Chelsea, especially within their kind of faltering period, may have been noted by Maresca as the kind of fixture congestion ameliorates a little bit. Underneath him is Watkins, who we've mentioned. Bowen with a broken foot now. I don't know if he will really make that. Aina, we're going to park him for the moment. We're going to discuss Nottingham Forest in just a little bit. And Sells as well is in this. Rogers on 88. If he does hit 176 this year, that's pretty damn good for 5.0, isn't it? He was one of the players in our very first pod back when we saw the price. We were like, wow, 5 million for this guy. He seems to have been starting a lot kind of at the tail end of last year. That's great value for money, isn't it? You were very close to going back there, weren't you, as well? I know he's suspended from next game, but
yeah,
those players who, as you reminded me a few weeks back, shouldn't really be far from our thoughts at any moment.
Yeah, for sure. I did very nearly go back there this week. Obviously, him hauling yet again was watched behind my fingers and behind my sofa. But the yellow card did kind of make it all okay, I guess. I'll let them take their haul, and obviously suspended for Leicester isn't the ideal time for it to happen. But he's had a phenomenal season, and he is a player that is getting noticeably better almost week on week now. And to a point where he's leading the side quite often and pushing them forward. So loving what I'm seeing. He's a great price point. I want to get back to him very soon. If he wasn't suspended, I probably would be doing it ahead of game week 20. I'm that keen on him. And I don't think he's going to be a million miles off of that 176 point projection at the moment. It might be a little bit down, but as someone who started at 5 million, if you're hitting something even near to 170 points, that is brilliant value for money. So yeah, I want to get back to him as soon as possible. After the Leicester game's out of the way, it's just finding the perfect hopping on point. And anyone who's still got him is obviously loving life.
Yeah, definitely. Jumping around a bit, going to miss out Brennan Johnson, miss out Iwobi, two players who, if I do get there, fine, absolutely great. And, keep an eye on them, I suppose, throughout the course of the season, but probably quite far from FPL teams. Sells, we'll speak about in a minute. Two more players in the top 20 at the moment. Trent on 83. So up to 171. Been a player that we started with and then kind of were quite happy to get rid of. And then with the Saka injury, he became kind of the buy-in as well as double game week kind of coming up potentially for Liverpool, well, definitely for Liverpool. This week, the fated 15-pointer, which you always love to see from a defender, and potentially on his way to Spain over the summer. So could he kind of disappear with his 200 club of his career in the Premier League, Sam? 7.2 now, sorry. I'm still, the jury's still out whether it's value for money, but at the same time, it kind of feels like he and Salah, especially if you're looking at Slot as being your assistant manager, when the double game week comes, if you spaffed your TC like I have, it feels like those are the two that you really want. The whole sort of old school notion of Trent being your kind of Liverpool attacker who happens to be in the defensive slot in FPL.
Yeah, I mean, he was actually my bold claim at the start of the season, if you remember the season-long ones, that he would hit 200 club. So a little bit of a defense of him and almost reinforcing that now. 83 points, just under half of a season from him. Projected to get 171 is still decent. But I think just a little uptick in the data would probably get him close. One or two extra hauls, maybe a free kick or two that flies in. Just something, just a little bit. Or I think with defenders as well, there is an element of luck in when those attacking returns come. If they come in a game, so Robinson's a good example here, where he seems to get attacking returns, and he's got 7 assists so far, but in almost all of those games, they haven't kept a clean sheet at the time, and therefore the hauls are stunted a little bit, and you're looking at more like drip feeds of points, 5s and 6s. Whereas Trent, in a team that are much better defensively than they have been under Klopp in recent seasons, he's actually quite likely that if he does get an attacking return, there's at least a 40 to 50% chance of him also having gotten a clean sheet in that match as well. And therefore, you can see him getting bonus points attached and quite a big haul. If he can net 2 or 3 of those big hauls, doesn't need to be goals, it can be assists between now and the end of the season with the clean sheets attached, bonus points will come with it. And I don't think he'll be that far away. The data suggests to me that we could be seeing another 10 to 12, maybe 14, 15 even attacking return season from Trent if he stays fit and if Liverpool continue to stay as strong at the back and pretty potent moving forwards as well. And look, if he is off at the end of the season, he'll want to finish on a high. They'll want to win the league and he'll want to go out a bit of a, I'll leave this to Liverpudlians and Liverpool fans to say whether or not he's a Liverpool legend. But if he's won 2 league titles with them as a homegrown talent, then I think he's certainly in the conversation. So he'll want to, if he is going, he'll want to finish on a high.
Yeah, no, for sure. Happy to have him effectively, and I've got him back again at the base price. Final one to discuss is Anthony Gordon, a player who we had high hopes for start of this year. Sorry, I think I started with him in my FPL team. Dropped off and didn't quite sort of manifest, but over the last few weeks has been steady, not consistent, consistent. So 3 assists and a goal over the last 4. good kind of fixtures coming up, and the underlying data is pretty good. So as a player who is kind of playing, so I've taken out likes of Noni Madeki, likes of Son, who I'm kind of obviously has the pedigree but hasn't particularly been interesting to me. Players who have played over 1,000 minutes, he's kind of, I guess, the top of in terms of non-pen XGI per 90 at 0.6. And given Newcastle's current kind of purple patch, and given their kind of next four fixtures read Spurs away, Wolves at home, Bournemouth at home, and Southampton away, I don't know if I'm looking to remove Odegaard, he's the one that I quite like, and he's the one who last year he was pretty close. I think from memory it was kind of 182, 183 he got.
Around
so
that.
he's one of those who has kind of it within him to reach the upper echelons, touch the upper echelons. It wouldn't take very many kind of moments of positive variance going his way. Wins a couple penalties or something like that in one game, and also scores, and then suddenly, hey, you know what, he's on for an 18, 19 pointer in one game, and that kind of chivies him upwards. I really like Gordon, the player that I kind of always admired and is interesting to watch, and has all those kind of different routes to points. 20th at the moment. He's actually, I think he's a joint with Trent and Pickford, who's not on this graphic for obvious reasons. But run rate of 5.2 points per game. A bit of a poor start to the season, I think, in loads of ways. It's only been kind of the last few weeks that he's really sort of motored on. But it just kind of shows how quickly kind of a player's fortunes can turn around. And suddenly a player like him is very high in mind for me. One of those who could sneak it, Sam, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to have a strong back end to the season, but the form Newcastle are in at the moment, they look very much back at their best. And it's also important to note that Gordon, to begin with in the season, was going through a bit of a positional change every now and then. They were trying Barnes out on the left, Gordon was going to the right. Also, there was a period where, of course, Isak was out as well. I think he had to play through the centre a little bit. Did get a couple of penalties with Isak out as well. So you never know, if Isak does get injured, then he might be assisted by the fact he gets penalties again. So there are factors in his favour, and him being back on the left-hand side, but probably permanently now, knowing how good Newcastle look, it would be kind of weird of Eddie Howe to mix it up and push him back out right. I think that there is an outside shot that he can overtake quite a few of these people and get up towards 200 points. I think if I was to put like money on where he finishes, I would say about 180 to 190, maybe just short. Yeah, but that's still really decent. From this point on, that's another 100 points in the second half of the season. And there, as we've seen so far, there's only 8 people on 100 points so far from the first half of the season, and we'd love to own every single one of them. So if he can do that, another 100 points in the second half, he is going to be effectively matching a 200-point season from this point onwards. And I think that's something to note, and I can definitely see Gordon doing that.
Yeah, the big thing with Newcastle is obviously no Europe, which every year it's one of those things that you need to keep an eye on. I remember like Chelsea, Arsenal being teams from the past who had no Europe, and suddenly you saw their players go gangbusters. And I think that's kind of a real boom for them. Obviously, they've got the Carabao semi-final against us, Arsenal, coming up, so it's something to kind of bear in mind. And the FA Cup further round, I think it's like this team near here. I think it's Bromley they've got in that.
Okay.
So I don't expect him to be playing that, but these kind of competitions are few and far between, I guess. And I think that's very good for a player like that 6 minutes. And as you said, it kind of seems like over the last few weeks, Howe's really settled on his position on Newcastle overall, and have that settled side. And I don't know, Spurs this weekend, I think that you'll see my bold claims. I'm just backing that to be a really good one going forward. So yeah, I mean, that's how we are on 200 Club at the moment. I think that we'll definitely come back to this. Lots of kind of interesting sort of areas to mine. I suspect we may see kind of 1 or 2 players really come out of the woodwork. But as I've kind of seen in previous years doing this, when you get to a certain point in the season, kind of around now, most of it's not exactly set in stone, but you've already got a very good idea, and it would take something absolutely miraculous for a player to emerge from around there. I mean, even Bruno's mentioned in the chat, Sons was mentioned in the chat, they're just below kind of here, so in kind of the 80s. You really need like a stellar performance. Martinelli as well has kind of crossed my mind just now in Saka's absence. They're all possible. It's all possible that they'll kind of come through to kind of start bothering the top 20, or indeed start bothering the 200 Club, and we need to wait and see. And if those players do start to kind of put a run of form together, then hey, Absolutely, it's a player that you really need to keep an eye on. Hopefully, for me, owning Sarr, for example, maybe he'll be the one who will have a great kind of end of the season. We just don't know. But yeah, a really interesting discussion. Those are really interesting things to look forward to as the season hits the second half. Cool. All right, let's move on to the Gameweek preview. So it's kneejerk, best transfers, bold claims, and a very, very short best captains. Mostly just one word. The kneejerk this week is all about Nottingham Forest. So Forest bump, slowly growing in effective ownership in isolation and in compound, Sam. So I said to you the other day, I was having a look at it, and you've got kind of the Forest defense around my ranks of 500k, and it's only going to get kind of bigger the higher up you go, especially Aina and Sells, who are in the top 20 at the moment. That kind of takes you to about kind of 37% week on week. So if they keep a clean sheet, it's really, really painful. Milenkovic, I think, is actually kind of fairly decently owned as well now, so maybe 5 or 6%. And then you've got Chris Wood, whose ownership is only going to be creeping higher just because he's being bought a lot for Cunha, who's been banned. So, I mean, they're one of those teams who, yes, they've kind of, I suppose, gotten the flowers, as you put it, over the last kind of little while as a team who have really been a bit of a surprise package. I do just wonder, and it's one of those things that, you've had a Forest player in your team for an awful long time. Maybe you jumped on Aina really early, or jumped on, Milenkovic really early, or had a Wood for a long time. But it's one of those teams I think that I have seen kind of in discussions, conversations around socials, and especially on WhatsApps and things like that. People say, are we sleeping on Forest? And I don't know, they really feel like a team that you either need to get on board with, a bit like Man United back in the day, or contest weekly and just, I don't know, they don't download, maybe, Sam. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think we're at the point now where you kind of can't ignore them. They're up in the Champions League spots at the halfway point. Their defensive data is very strong. It's not just the fact that they've happened to keep clean sheets. We've seen it with teams like Everton in recent seasons where they've kind of ground out results and ground out clean sheets, even if the data doesn't necessarily reflect it. With Forest this year, 1.07 XGC per 90 across the season, very decent. And you only have to look at the squad and the members of their back line to realise why it's so decent. They've got a very good back line. Milenkovic next to Murillo is a great combination of centre-backs, arguably Champions League level centre-backs. And then you've got Ola Aina, who's been brilliant as well. Sells in goal, again, outstanding so far this season. Although at the start of the year, I probably would have laughed at you if you told me that he would be one of the best keepers in the league at this point, because he was pretty shaky last year, if I remember correctly. But overall, Nuno's got them playing extremely good defensive football, but also breaking with pace and creating very decent chances for Chris Wood every single week. They've got a bit of everything about them. And yeah, look, you would expect a little bit of a drop off. I don't know whether they'll make Champions League football, and even the defensive data might regress a little. But even if it does, they're still going to be a thoroughly decent team to invest in, considering the prices. And every week that you don't invest in a defender or don't invest in Chris Wood, you are now making a decision that maybe in recent weeks up until this point, it wasn't necessarily a decision. It was just something you can maybe ignore and pretend doesn't exist. Now you no longer can. It's, do I back them to continue keeping clean sheets and Chris Wood score, or Chris Wood not scoring, and or the reverse? So I think for me, I'm bullish on the defense. I'm probably not buying a defender right now just because my defense is in okay shape. Chris Wood, though, is more tempting because at least one of my strikers isn't performing brilliantly right now, and I can get to him without a hit with one free transfer pretty easily. And I can't really see it changing that much too soon. It might regress a little, but even a little, I think, is absolutely fine.
I'm kind of almost, I obviously completely understand what you say. A lot of it kind of comes down to your kind of circumstance, doesn't it? So you've got Robinson at the back, I don't, and I've got like an open spot in defence, and it really is kind of, and we'll come on to him in a minute, but a case of kind of, do I contest Robinson, or do I get involved with this this defence? I think it would be kind of Milenkovic, or maybe kind of Neco Williams at 4.3, who's obviously a really cheap route in. I mean, do I back them to continue this kind of amazing performance defensively? Probably, to be honest. I mean, overall, they don't have. They're out of the Carabao Cup. They've got the FA Cup kind of there. But they're one of those teams you can really they're liberated to focus entirely on the league. There is the Nuno effect with defence, which I we saw at Wolves as well, and it's what he can do in terms of organising a defence, and he and his team. So do I back them to do this for over a long period? Is it, if I bought Milenkovic, for example, is he a player that I play in pretty much any game that I possibly could? Probably, to be honest. I mean, they do have a few tough fixtures on the horizon. I mean, none of it. It's not that there's a sea of green coming, because they had that at the start of the year, arguably. But they're still a team that you want to be backing somewhere along the line, and that's my struggle. Do I look at this 36% EO for their defense, 30-40% actually, if you factor in all the other players at the back, or do I try to contest that week to week? Because someone like Lewis Hall, for example, where does he fit in if you've also got a Forest defender? If you've got Gabriel and you've got Trent, are you then playing 4 at the back? If you've got Raya, I mean, are you making goalkeeper transfers to get to sells? I mean, it's quite tricky, isn't it? Really, when you think about the pragmatic side of it, where you're like, yeah, okay, this is a really good defense, but if I want a piece of it, that means that someone else misses out that I might not necessarily want to miss out going forward. It's it's one of those interesting conundrums you get week to week, year to year. And similarly in attack, Sam. So you've got the player to potentially remove. I've got this Raul Jimenez bloke, who I think will now the fixtures are spaced quite nicely, will start the next few, and he's got Ipswich, West Ham, and Leicester, and crucially is 5.5 versus would be in 6.7, and it's another transfer I'd need to make. So it's one of those where it's about picking your battles a little bit, but now it's been flagged, and if you are in a different position than Sam and I, and you are thinking, oh, I don't really know what to do in terms of the defensive, I think you would be probably, I think Aina may have gotten too expensive now a little bit. I think he's benefiting from, as I say every week, that the reflex. I need to make a defender transfer. I'm just going to buy the highest scoring defender. I think probably looking at a Milenkovic or going really cheap with Neco Williams, and I think then it's Chris Woods. Gibbs White, a player that we did like at the start of the year, I think, both of us, but I'm not sure whether I'd be investing in that midfield right now. Is that fair to say? It's all about the defenders or the attack or the striker and Chris Wood, isn't it?
Yeah. Also, am I right in saying that Morgan Gibbs White lost penalties to Chris Wood as well, which is a reason that we wanted Gibbs White at the start of the season as an option, that he was on penalties. That's gone, and is another benefit for Chris Wood. In defence, I particularly like Milenkovic. His XG is really strong, 0.15 per 90. So he's a big goal threat from set pieces, a Gabriel-esque, you would say, very close on the underlying data to Gabriel from those set piece threats. So I really like him. He's a good price point, is beating Ola Aina in the underlying data quite considerably. So if I was picking a Forest defender, it would probably be him, unless you wanted to go cheaper. And Neco Williams is obviously on the table then. Probably not midfield. There's a bit of rotation. Elanga could be an interesting differential, but it's only recently that he's really nailed down that starting spot. So maybe a short-term one. Who is on good form. Obviously, I think four attacking returns in one in each week in a row now for the last 4 game weeks. But I would never feel properly confident that lasts. No. And Nuno does change systems a little bit and sometimes plays without those sort of wingers. People like Hudson-Odoi or Elanga have been known in past to get randomly rotated out for a system tweak. Milenkovic is never going to have that problem. Wood has had that problem once all season against Arsenal. I doubt it happens again, considering the form he's in and how important he is, but you never know. Yeah, I think for me, it's circumstantial. If you can easily get to Milenkovic and you've got a spot on your defence, then he's definitely in the conversation. But I wouldn't be selling the likes of Robinson. I wouldn't be selling Munoz or a Hall or Gabriel or Trent. So it's if you've got a spot. And if you don't, then I think it's fine to back against them for the next few.
Yeah, Paul Jones has just said in the chat, and another one who seems to be reading my notes, that if you do have Timber this week, Sam,
Yeah.
it struck me that maybe you might think, oh, okay, well, Arsenal's run, and this is backed up by a review as well, which seems to be kind of a bit colder now on double defence. I mean, Arsenal's run does kind of start to key into playing teams that you wouldn't expect them to score because Arsenal's defence is still so good, but I think the expectation, I suppose, of keeping that clean sheet is getting lower, and our double defence maybe is at its end. So maybe this could be a good off ramp to go to a team like Forest, and we'll talk about Robinson in a minute, or go to Fulham if you want to contest Robinson, whose EO is kind of similar actually to the entire Forest defence. So I mean, that could be a way that you could possibly get there if you do have that kind of the free transfer, or you want to make a move and you've got players on your bench you don't really like or trust to come in this week. So yeah, quite a lot going on. I think to kind of move into the best transfers as well, this kind of nicely links in because Chris Wood has been brought in by almost 500,000 managers. That Indian summer continuing for him. Oh God, it's going to be a real kind of hammer this week, isn't it, if he scores? Isaac's still been brought in, 300,000 transfers in for Isaac. Aina being brought in by, was that 200,000 for Aina? So that train is not showing any sign of abating. Lewis Hall brought in by 200,000, and Lewis Diaz as well. On the other side, to fuel the Chris Wood purchases, Cunha. Over 600,000 sales for Cunha. Jackson, people getting bored of him as well, which I completely understand, to be honest. Almost 400,000 sales for him. And then the likes of Maddison, Rodgers, and Saka. Rodgers been sold because he's suspended for one game, which I don't really get. But Saka been sold rightfully, probably 150k. I also noted that Mr. Robinson, who we spoke about earlier on, 150,000 transfers in for him. So I said the Forest defence is kind of nudging 40%. Robinson on his own is 35% at my EO, and probably even higher the higher up you go. And after this week, we'll probably be kind of nudging the 40. And that puts a really interesting situation for me. We'll talk about later on. One of those players who is really... one of those who could sneakily kind of take points off you week to week. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing too surprising is in there, Sam. One thing I was going to ask you about is people buying Trent. So almost 200,000 transfers for Trent, and not too far behind Luis Diaz. And do non-owners still try and buy, do you think, despite the fact he's risen 0.2?
I think so. I think the one mitigating factor here is we've already spoken about the other options in defence. You could easily build a defence of 4.5 to 5 million assets, a Nottingham Forest defender, a Fulham, a Crystal Palace like a Munoz, Milenkovic in there, Hall as well. And not really ever have to worry about spending any more, knowing that they're all thoroughly decent value for money at that price. They won't get as many clean sheets and probably not as many attacking returns as Trent, but that saving could probably get you quite a long way. So it's a structural thing. It's whether or not you want that extra, maybe slightly more expensive midfielder. Maybe a fourth midfielder gets bumped from someone who's around 5.56 million to something more like 7 to 8 million. So you could have, let's just say, for example, a Salah Palmer alongside Mbeumo and a Gordon, rather than one or the other of Mbeumo or Gordon, just as a reference point. Or you could have a third stronger striker. So you could go Jackson, Isak, and Chris Wood, for example. So I don't think Trent is a must, but, and also actually on that note, I wouldn't let the fact that he's just scored a 15-pointer colour your opinion too much. We know he's capable of that at different times in the season. It might happen once, possibly twice more this year, but it won't necessarily happen every single week. So don't panic about it, although Man United is a pretty decent opportunity for it to happen again. I definitely wouldn't be ripping off my teams. If there was an easy on-ramp which didn't need a hit to get there, I think I would probably do it at this point. And even probably now sell an Arsenal defender, maybe not Gabriel, but either Saliba or Timber, I probably would sell to accommodate a Trent now. Gabriel, based on the underlying attacking data, I'd probably hold on to. And great value for money, of course, in comparison. So yeah, I don't think it's a rip up your teams kind of thing, but if you can get there easily without a hit and it doesn't ruin your structure moving forwards, especially considering that double game week is coming pretty soon now, I think it just makes sense to try and squeeze them in if you can.
Yeah, certainly. I agree with you. I think it's just one of those things that I'm kind of glad I got done a little while back, so I don't have to worry about it anymore. If you do
Yeah.
have that, especially if you've got Timber out, as kind of you touched on, I think maybe you would be looking at that and thinking, is this the time just to kind of they've got an easy game next, and it's nice to, haven't they? Let's be fair. So is that where another double-digit haul comes from? You wouldn't be surprised, would you? And then you kind of got him kind of there sorted, you're done with it. I mean, I'd almost be kind of owning him to comparing a Diaz to buying a Diaz, sorry, or buying a Jota or something like that, where you've got the expected minutes, you've got that kind of semblance of expected goal involvement. I mean, we're not kind of talking huge amounts, but still kind of decent enough, I think, for a player who's got the expected minutes. So yeah, I don't know. He'd be one of those that if I wasn't with him right now and I had the free transfers, or I was thinking, oh, do I just take a hit to get it done? I'd be thinking, you know what, United game is a good excuse to move the player in. Just go for it, honestly. And the other one that we've got on the graphic today, I'll leave the Castagna who's on the graphic there to my team in the end. But Watkins, Sam. So we discussed him already. Both said that we've got a decent inkling that he might pick it up over the course of the second half of the season if he's able to deal with the competition from Duran, and if his minutes do get managed enough with respect to continental competition. People selling Jackson, as I've noted and mentioned. I don't know. Could Watkins be a sneaky pickup for those who are done with Jackson? I mean, no Rodgers for the next game, I think, would worry me. But the next game is Leicester at home, so there could be a temporary short-term upturn from that particular manoeuvre. I can understand why people are going there, and I don't know. There's something about it I'm not entirely sure of, especially with Chelsea's run still looking fairly rosy until kind of March time, so game become 28-ish.
Yeah, and I think what we've seen this season, but also through several years of pain in FPL, is if you try and back a player on the basis of one particular fixture, more often than not, you do seem to get hurt a little bit if it's not also a good longer term pick. And Ollie Watkins, it's a great on ramp, isn't it? Leicester at home, it couldn't really get any better. They will be a bit depleted without Morgan Rodgers in there, but they'll still, you would think, be strong enough to dispatch Leicester and create a decent amount of XG for Ollie Watkins. That being said, even though that game's a guarantee for him to start and probably get some points, it's just one game week, and really the maximum upside you can realistically expect is something like a 16, 17 points from him in that week, which is great. But also there are loads of different scenarios where he could even blank. We saw it with Crystal Palace assets. Even though they played well against Southampton, they still didn't actually get any points on the whole. So these things can happen, and fortune can swing both ways. So you want to back a player that you have confidence in, not just for that one shiny fixture. That might be a good excuse to get them in the first place, but also know that if he's going to be staying in your team for a few weeks and you've not just got 1,000,001 free transfers to burn next week, then you have to have a bit more confidence that this isn't just a flash in the pan and he gets rotated back out for Duran when his suspension is over, or his minutes continue to get better and better each week. The data's good. Obviously, we know the quality of the player is there. It's a bit of a shot in the dark, and because he's more expensive than Jackson, if he was cheaper, I think I'd be tempted. But because he's more expensive, and then it becomes more of a structural thing with my team in particular, I've not got tons of free money to spare. I think I'd prefer to spend that money elsewhere, and I've just got a bit more confidence on either Jackson or maybe looking at someone like Chris Wood at the moment, longer term.
Yeah, I think I can't fault going with Watkins. I mean, talisman now on penalties for a team with decent attacking numbers. It's very difficult, isn't it? It really is. But I kind of would be, I don't know. I think most of us do have different areas of priority this week, and that could be the opportunity, but it could also be the issue. And I agree with you that I probably would want that money to be marshaled elsewhere in my team. But I mean, I think we both agree that Watkins is a player that we both really like. We're both fans of Watkins, especially under Emery and how he deploys him in that sort of Vardy-esque stick around the box sort of role. And without the competition, I don't know. don't know. Maybe we might see the Watkins of last year, a player who's a reluctant avoid right now for me. Just I've got other things to do, and I'm kind of hoping that that ownership number doesn't tick up too highly, especially when you've got Isaac and still being bought up, and I think you've still got kind of. I wouldn't be surprised, Sam, if I'm sat here, say when we get to game week kind of 23, 24, and I've still got a bit of money in the bank, and maybe everything's kind of sorted for assistant manager chip, and I'm just like, well, all right, Watkins has been doing great. Jackson's continued to flash this eve. Maybe I just move him on, but I don't know if I can jump him right now. Basically, even though the fixture would be right now, it's difficult, isn't it? Right, bold claims for this week.
Yeah, I went with a Haaland hat-trick against Leicester. Didn't happen, but he did look a little bit better. Got a goal, of course, but you don't get points for that. So still 2 points across the season for me so far. No Haaland hat-trick.
Yep, and I happiness hedged Cunha to score at least a brace versus Spurs. Didn't happen. Got taken off at half time because he felt something, and he's going to miss the next game, but he might be injured anyway. So fortuitous for Wolves all round. Next week,
I'm going against the grain slightly. I think Liverpool will have a great game against Man United, but who knows where the points will come from? Well, obviously, most likely it will be Mo Salah, and this is why it's a bold claim. I'm going for Diaz and Gakpo to both outscore Salah. I was just going to say the other two starting attackers, but I thought I'd go bolder than that and actually pick who I believe will be the starting three, and Diaz and Gakpo to both outscore Salah in that game.
Yep. Okay. I'm going for an exciting one for me, which is 10 plus goals across 2 games. So Spurs, Newcastle, that's one of those games that surely, I mean, I've done this in the past and they've gone and scored. It's been a 1-0, but surely that game, it's both BTTS, both teams to score. That game kind of, I wouldn't be surprised if easily it's like a 4-3 classic or something like that. And then Man City versus West Ham. Just about 30% down at FPL. That I wouldn't be surprised if West Ham kind of have a bit of a just a tonic sort of performance where they let it all out against West Ham. Looking at maybe a 4 or 5. So I feel more confident about this bold claim coming through, Sam, than I have about many others.
Yeah,
I say that now, and maybe I'll end up with 2 horses in the Newcastle and Spurs game, and they're both blank, and it's kind of 1-0 for Spurs, like a Werner goal off his ankle when he means to shoot in the other direction, and then West Ham come away with a 0-0. But hey, I mean, it really feels like one of those kind of, especially because we're at the end of the festive period. I think there'll be loads of goals this game week. I think those 2 games should elicit more than double figure of goals. So there we go.
Yeah.
And best captain, right, Sam? We've spent a lot of time. We left a lot of time to talk about this. No, we haven't. It's Salah, isn't it?
Yeah, one word: Salah. Do it. Easy.
Right. Excellent. There we go.
Should we give more than that? No, I don't think so.
I think that Isaac's the best vice captain this week. Does that count?
Yeah, that counts. It's a great option. I saw some people talking about it, but honestly, like, really, at this point, come on, he's on track for 400 points. Don't do it to yourself. Like, we're just getting punished every week you go against him. He's going to haul against Man United.
Yeah, I mean, if you are getting itchy feet about it, look at it the other way. As I've said time ad nauseam, this is a great opportunity to get gains from the rest of your team. There are a few things, as we flagged, with the likes of Robinson, the likes of the Nottingham Forest defence. If you don't know Isaac, for example, that is like an EO problem that you might need to deal with. But if you have an EO vacuum, as I said last year with Haaland, then it does kind of throw the focus on the rest of your team. And that's a really good opportunity. I know that the captain, getting the differential captain off, can be a really good sort of opportunity, probably the premium opportunity to get that huge sort of massive rise in your rank. But right now, especially against United, it just doesn't feel like the right time, really. If statistically, quantitatively, qualitatively, it's just not worth it right now. It would be kind of how I'd be thinking about it. But yep, you're the captain of your own ship. So if you want to go against it, and if you do well with an Isaac captain or with a Palmer captain, then fair play to you. But it's just too rich for my blood, that sort of gamble. Right. So a little bit shorter this week, but here we are. Teams for the week ahead, and where are we looking to plan? What about you?
Yeah, so I've got an interesting one. I'll read out my team very quickly. Raya and Gabriel away at Brighton. data's really good, so I'm not too fussed about owning double Arsenal defence still. It's been a bit disappointing, but the data is there. Trent and Robinson, absolutely fine with the defensive line generally. I am benching Hall at the moment, who I do think has a chance of getting something against Spurs, but I do still think Spurs, especially at home, score. So maybe Hall's upside is a little bit lower than it would have been against Man United. In the midfield, I've got obviously Salah cap, Palmer vice at the moment, although I will now probably be switching that to Isak, knowing how many defensive issues Spurs have now. Udogie is also out for 6 to 10 weeks as well. And Burmo, Southampton away, Semenyo at home to Everton. Don't love that fixture. I think I was speaking to you about it generally. I think Bournemouth are much better in games where the opposition comes out to attack them and it turns into a bit of a ping pong game. Whereas Everton will sit in a little bit. Bournemouth will have to try and break them down. I'm not as confident, but it's still a good fixture. And Semenyo has been an extremely frustrating player for me to own and start in the weeks where he's been getting points. I've benched every single one of his returns since I got him on wildcards all 13 weeks ago or whatever it is. So yeah, starting him at Everton, so he will blank. Up front at the moment, it's Isak, João Pedro at home to Arsenal. Obviously not a great game, but he's on penalties. He's getting 90 minutes. I'm not willing to make a transfer on it at the moment, and I still think he's the best the best sub 6 million forward. And Jackson away at Crystal Palace. Now, if I did want to mix things up, Jackson to Wood would be potentially on the radar, save me a bit of money, bring in what will now be a bit of an EO, something to really shield against, I guess, EO wise. But I've got 2 free transfers. I can make it 3. And I was very hot on trying to build up that bank of free transfers going into double game week and chip season. I think that will really come in clutch. And Jackson away at Palace is not a bad one as well. So could I roll? I think yes, probably.
Yep, I think so. Yeah, I mean, Wood's the EO buster, isn't he, really?
Yeah.
But I think you've got most things covered there. I wouldn't be too worried about that. I thought it was interesting that Semenyo and Brennan Johnson have the same underlying data metrics at 7.7 for non-pin XGI. It's all priced in, isn't it, for what they are and what they do. Not the best game in the world, as you say, on the qualitative factors, but absolutely fine. Overall, I wouldn't be moving Jackson right now, just kind of personal opinion. But if you do kind of get to the weekend, you think, oh, you know what, I just can't stomach another week of not owning Wood, then I can kind of understand that too. But yeah, you're more than fine to roll this week. Absolutely. You've got most of the key kind of players covered off there, especially with Boomo as well in situ.
On to you, Tom.
Yeah, so I think I'm going again. There you are, calmly building up a rack of clean shit of full free transfers, and here I am thinking, oh god, do I do a New Year's hit? I don't know. So I got Ryan goal, happy with that. Trent and Gabriel, like you. Hall's currently on the pitch, but I'm pretty sure, in fact, there's almost definitely going to be a defensive transfer in the offing, which would put Hall first bench, because I do expect Spurs to score. In midfield, it's Ødegaard, Palmer, Salah, and Sarr. Sarr, who I do think is going to have, again, really good underlying data. In the last game, it didn't quite come through, but I mean, yeah, it's Chelsea, whatever, but I don't have a Chelsea defensive asset, and that kind of fits the good. His underlying numbers are good, fair play. Up front, Isak, Jackson, and Raul Jimenez. I'm happy with Raul. It's not quite worked out over the Christmas period, so he does owe me big. But I do think the next few weeks are going to be good enough. And I think that hopefully he'll put up a decent fight with João Pedro, despite the ex-Mins penalty that he's got, to kind of make that 5.5 or 5.6. It's looking like it will be by the deadline. Price tag decent. And on the bench is Ahmad, Mikalenko, and Van Hecke. So there's a couple of things here. One, a couple of weeks ago, I was very bullish on Ødegaard and what he might potentially do in terms of end products in Saka's absence. It doesn't look like that's happening, unfortunately. It's not worked out like I wanted it to. So part of me is wondering if I just admit defeat on that. So I think maybe be between Bumo and Gordon. I know Bumo's got the initial sort of Southampton game, but probably be favouring Gordon just due to the underlying data. Decent frame form for Newcastle with Spurs this weekend, and it's kind of a good compound differential to have Isaac and Gordon. Sometimes it's worth a missing defeat on a player like Ødegaard. If he is in my team by the time deadline passes, then so be it. If he's not, then fine. But yeah, the real conundrums at the back, really. So you own Robinson, I don't. So the question is, do I kind of take on Robinson this week with a player like Castagna? This is the week where Robinson ownership could hit me very hard because of the Ipswich game. And after this, I'm happy playing Hull versus Wolves, Bournemouth and Saints alongside Gabriel and Trent. So it would just be this week. I'll be buying Castagna in, and after that, he just becomes a bit of kind of a bench option. He could be Anderson, but hoping that they do 5 at the back again, maybe I'd kind of just plump for Castagna. Review kind of prefers that as well. Or, as we've discussed, do I get a Forest player in and try to just kind of jump on that particular grenade? So I've got 2 grenades I could jump on, and inevitably I'll jump on the dud, and the live one will explode. But the other question is, do I get a Forest player in and try to figure out that one going forward? There's maybe I kind of back them, as I said earlier on, to be kind of longer term defensive juggernaut. The issue with that, as Claire earlier on said in the chat, is if I end up with Milenkovic or something, I'm going to want to play them every week as well. And then I've got a bench headache between him and Hall, for example, every week. So I'm kind of minded to go with a Castagna or an Anderson, so I can just kind of contest Robinson this week. And after that, I'm more than happy to play Hall and let other people have the benching headache. To be honest, between Robinson and Hall, especially considering that kind of a Gabriel and Doris Lieb and Trent are kind of, they seem to be kind of in most teams that I see. So yeah, I mean, I think the defensive transfer, which is Van Hecke, to a Castagna, happens every time this week. It's just whether Sam, I just give up on the Ødegaard's thinking. It's just, I know it's kind of obviously 2 weeks, but to the eye, it's just not quite happened for me in a way that I really wanted it to. I was last week with him playing it kind of basically a centre midfield role. That was kind of, I was just like, okay, well, it's Ipswich, that's fine. Rice isn't playing because of fitness or whatever. And then Brentford, Rice didn't play again. And I was thinking, okay, well, Marino and Partey, that's good because hopefully they can play, in a bit of a double pivot, and then Ødegaard can kind of be that kind of nominal sort of 10-ish that I said. And didn't quite work out that way as I described. He was more, again, involved with the pre-assisting kind of David Silva sort of role. And maybe it is the case that I just kind of think, well, okay, well, I had all this, I had maybe kind of made a educated guess on what could happen with his role going forward without Saka, but maybe that's just not the case. And maybe it is kind of time to look at a Gordon, or maybe just kind of even crab across to Martinelli. But my feeling would be that I just kind of go with a Gordon and kind of just back what we said earlier on about what he is as an asset. Is it worth -4? That's then the question. I'm not really sure, but I prefer to be on your path, i.e. building up free transfers. And if I got kind of both of those things sorted this week, then I'd be pretty happy with the team going forward. In fact, I could just do the Ødegaard move and just play Hall this week, as is the team on the table, and just kind of hope that Hall outperforms Robinson, because in your situation you've got to bench Hall for Robinson, so maybe that would be it. But I'd have a subpar player like Van Hecke, who is fine to park at third bench, but I don't know. It's one of those that I need to kind of give a bit more time to, and I'm glad. It looked like, as I said before we started, that it looked like I'd have to make a transfer tonight, but I don't seem to need to. So got a bit of time to think about it. I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I understand the logic on both of those transfers, and I think if you had 2 frees, I'd do both of them right now, because I think they're both marked upgrades. I don't think there's any real question there. Whether or not you need to do either this week, I'm looking and I'm thinking you could roll with this. Honestly, it's not as bad as maybe you might think it is. Ødegaard's been a bit more withdrawn. I think Havertz being out as well might have affected that a little bit today. I'm not sure, but obviously he's not living up to the hype that we were hoping he would in the last couple of game weeks. I do really like Gordon. I think if I was going to pick one of them, Burmo or Gordon right now, I'd be tempted to try it out on Gordon. Lower EO and a good goal threat at the moment. But Mbeumo's always a safe pick. I picked him for that 90 minutes, the penalties, and actually I really like the fixtures now coming. Outside of the Liverpool game, I think it's actually a really decent run for attacking returns. If I was you, I think... What would I do? I think I'd probably make the Ødegaard move, not the defensive transfer, which sounds crazy, but I think I'd probably start Hall and just live with it. Hall has just been so exceptional recently, and while Spurs, I guess they're likely to score, I thought the same thing about Man United. And Newcastle have been really sharp defensively. I think that it's not impossible that they keep another clean sheet. Seems unlikely, obviously, with the fixture to come. But Spurs, at some point, with all of the injuries they've gotten, will be impacted in attack as well. Because if their build-up play from the back isn't anywhere near as strong, Van de Ven, his passes through the lines obviously have massive impact in the way they build up. Udogie being out as well comes and cuts inside on the left-hand side. That's going to impact them going forward too. I just wonder, and I'm a little bit scared benching Hall personally myself. So whilst, look, on paper, it's not ideal having Hall starting instead of like a Fulham defender, perhaps. Newcastle have been known to keep many more clean sheets than Fulham have so far this season. I think Fulham were on 3, Newcastle 7, possibly, maybe 6. So there's always a chance that you could just stick with it. And I would probably chase the upside on the Ødegaard to someone like Gordon, personally.
Yeah, I mean, you probably well. Actually, I think I'm pretty sure I saw Newcastle like 4th for XGC this year.
Yeah,
So,
almost matching Forest actually. Yeah,
so
really
it's
close.
It's actually not that bad. And as you say, there's the upside with Hall, and I've been thinking as well that maybe it is just because, as I said earlier on about I'd be happy playing Hall versus Wolves, Bournemouth, and Saints, and then someone like you has then got the benching headache with Gabriel and Trent as well. That maybe then I just kind of Ødegaard's not going to, even though it will be kind of I'll be emotionally exposed because I've sold him, right? So if he does return against Brighton, I'll be like, oh, for fuck's sake. but it's not going to hit me kind of materially, is it?
No.
So I think that's kind of where I'm slightly kind of leaning at the moment, just to do Ødegaard to Gordon. So it's good sort of confirmation bias actually, to go there, and then that gives me 1.5 million in the bank for whatever I want to do going forward, which could even mean that say I kind of was just like, well, all right, Jimenez and James FPL has screwed me over one last time. He's failed me for the last time. It's time to just get inward. Then I can afford to do that. So that might be the way forward, but I really want to be on your path. I'm very envious of where you are with your team. So I think that maybe you're right, and maybe it is just the case I do with regard to Gordon. Definitely keep an eye on it in the next couple of days. But I don't know. I feel like I've taken loads of hits this year, and maybe it is kind of just from talking it through the case I was look at, right, okay, if I've got to have something kind of slightly suboptimal, like playing a Hall this week, who is still going to be very popular, then maybe I just go with that, and then do sort out the problem that I think I've got, where I've kind of misfired with what I was thinking with the Saka replacement, sort that out, and then from there, hopefully, finally look to roll transfer again. No, as a solid, man. Thank you very much.
No, just one quick note on that as well. Just as you were talking, an opportunity that would present itself to you is if you didn't make the defensive transfer this week and did the Ødegaard to Gordon, next week you've got a great on-ramp for Munoz instead. And I think his upside is a lot greater than any Fulham defender, for instance, or even a lot of the Nottingham Forest defenders too. So that might be an angle where you maybe push the defensive transfer a week, and then you can get the player with incredible upside and underlying attacking data for Crystal Palace next week.
Yeah, no, it definitely feels like there's a lot more benefits now. I'm glad we had a discussion. I'm glad we did this pod. It definitely helps me kind of just think, okay, right, what do I do? What does a wise man think? Not me.
Not me.
I'm much wiser than I am. So that's very helpful. And I think that I'm probably looking at Ødegaard to Gordon, but I will leave it for a couple of days. There's obviously maybe going back to Mbeumo just because there's the Southampton game. We have discussed the other side of it with the overperformance, but I think he's just a quality player. and there may be a couple of other options, but I think it would be between those two. And I think I would be kind of leaning towards just getting Gordon in, because I think that the player himself, he and Hall together actually provide a bit of a poor man's Salah and Trent almost. I know it's wrong. I know it's the wrong side, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Also, they're both blonde and look quite a lot alike on TV. So at least if you've got them both, you know that if the assist has gone in or the goal's gone in, oh, well, at least I can celebrate for sure. Whereas at the moment, if I get an assist out of Hall, I'm not sure whether I can celebrate until you get a bit more of a close-up angle and you can see that it is actually him, not Gordon.
Yeah. So yeah, I'd be yeah, it's good. It's good for the blindness. Okay, excellent. Well, we're coming in at just under an hour and a half, Sam. Whoops.
Yeah, oopsie. It was meant to be a shorter one. And of course, we've got a fairly quick turnaround to the deadline. So hopefully you've had time to listen and enjoy to this one. A very happy new year once again from me. And I'm sure Tom will wish you it in a minute's time as well. But thank you all so much for listening. We were Who Got the Assist. You can find us on Blue Sky at WGTA or myself at FPL Pricey. WGTA_FPL on Twitter. Again, FPL Pricey on there for me. And Instagram and Threads, WGTA.FPL. Again, you can guess it, FPL Pricey for me. If you enjoyed the pod, if you could give us a follow on those social channels, that'd be fantastic. But also, if you could give the pod a 5-star rating wherever you're listening to it, iTunes, Spotify, wherever. Or, of course, if you're watching along live or back on YouTube at a later date, if you could just drop a like and subscribe to the channel, that would be very helpful too.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Sam. I hope you enjoyed the pod and hope you got you thinking about the 200 Club for this season. Happy New Year again, everybody, and looking forward to assisting you in 2025. Speak to you on Monday, Tuesday? Yeah, Tuesday.
Yeah, one of those.
Yeah. No, it's Tuesday from this. So yeah, final note, it's Tuesday from this time onwards, just because my job change means that I'm in the office every day on Mondays and Tuesdays particularly. So I can't do Monday nights for the pod anymore. So it's going to be on Tuesday from now on. Sorry about that, but it is what it is. Speak to you very soon.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist?